Mr. Belger, I want to go back to one of Commissioner Gorelick's subjects. You very clearly described the protocol with respect to hijacking that was in effect on 9/11. But we have this rather troubling note from the staff that I will share with you and ask you to comment on. Most managers at FAA headquarters had little or no recollection of the protocols in place on 9/11 with respect to their roles and responsibilities in a hijacking. With the exception of a few individuals from the security division, there appeared to be little or no training at FAA headquarters or command center regarding hijacking procedures. Indeed, when asked to identify who the hijack coordinator was on 9/11, it was difficult to find two witnesses who identified the same individual. At the command center, no one could remember any training or exercises regarding the role of that the center would play in a hijacking. Is that a fair statement?
Well, from my perspective, there is no doubt in my mind that the FAA security organization knew what to do. There is no doubt in my mind that the air traffic organization knew what to do. They're the two key players in that type of scenario. I mean, Mr. Griffith was the senior air traffic person in the headquarters. He probably has more direct knowledge of what the air traffic people knew than I did. If maybe he could answer that.
Fine.
Thank you. As Mr. Belger stated, from my point of view, I'm absolutely sure that our field managers knew on 9/11 what to do in the event of a hijack. The procedures are very clear. The procedures are trained as a matter of refresher training in our operational facilities every year. And it surprises me to hear that someone would think that our field managers would not know what to do in the event of hijacking. There are protocols, there are checklists, there are folders that are kept at operational positions where people have responsibility for reporting. And through the years, not only for hijackings, but aircraft accidents and other incidents, reporting is a very high priority. So it surprises me that people would think our managers didn't know how to report.
Well, Mr. Sliney, you were at the command center. As a matter of fact, you were in your job. It was your first day on this particular job. Is the statement at the command center, no one could remember any training or exercises regarding the role the command center would play in a hijacking, correct?
I don't believe it's correct, no. I believe that the FAA or the command center personnel understood that the protocol was in place, that the center that reported the hijacking would notify the military. And I believe we have already outlined, or Mr. Belger has already outlined, that the usual practice in handling hijacks, I go back to 1964 where I began my air traffic career, and they had always followed the same protocol. So I think that command center personnel were at least in tune to that aspect of the protocol. Now, whether they're aware of a specific protocol that involved NMCC, that I do not know. I could say I did not know.
Mr. Belger, how promptly after 9/11 was the hijacking protocol revised?
The next morning, I asked for several things to be done. One was a complete review of the performance of our operations center, and then I asked a senior air traffic person for the field to come in and help me with that process in the air traffic organization. That process began immediately. The things that we did most quickly were to put in direct communication capability. At that time, we didn't have the sophisticated capability we have today, but direct communication capability between our field centers and NORAD, with the instructions to call NORAD immediately, as Mr. Sliney said. We put in the 24-hour communication net, which is still operational today, where all the federal agencies are hearing real-time what's happening in the air traffic control system. We put out some awareness training for the controllers to make them a little better aware of the slightest deviation of an aircraft from their flight plan, the slightest communication problem, the slightest transponder problem. which in the past might have been handled differently. Those are now, and as of the next day, were reported immediately to NORAD. I mean, those things were done immediately.
I'd like to go beyond that. Every element of your answer relates to how people within FAA and the controllers were to respond. But the previous protocol said to the airlines, to the pilots and to the crews, cooperate,
Yes.
get the plane down. How quickly was any change, if any change indeed was made, how quickly was any change planned and made in that respect?
We started talking about that immediately. Secretary Mineta put together a couple of rapid response teams. One of their recommendations, I think, dealt with specifically what you're referring to, the training for flight crews, and those procedures were changed. I can't tell you exactly how long that took, but it was the process was put in place quickly.
It is that protocol, are those instructions to the airlines a matter of public knowledge now, or is this something that is simply regulated between FAA, TSA, and the airlines themselves?
I don't know how public that is, to be honest with you. I've been gone for almost 2 years, and I honestly don't know.
Okay. Mr. Sliney, you're the only one who's still there. This isn't your direct responsibility, but do you know the answer to that question?
I do not.
Okay. Let me go on to you, Mr. Sliney, with a few questions. One, you, on your first day on the job, made two decisions on 9/11 that at one level at least weren't yours to make, did you not? First, that no one should take off, and second, that we should take all civilian aircraft out of the air. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Would you describe how you came to that decision and why you felt it imperative enough to make that decision without going through the usual command structure?
I believed I had the authority to do those things on that day. I was charged with the safe and efficient operation of the National Airspace System. The ground stop, the national ground stop, was a matter of scope, not of unfamiliarity with the remedy, but a matter of scope. And since we had already put in place ground stops that covered Boston, New York, and essentially the East Coast, and those, we still had more reports of aircraft whose course or altitude or other aspects of their flight made them suspicious in light of the crashes. That was the national ground stop was just a natural extension of the smaller scoped ground stops. As to the order to land, that was the product of the men and women in the command center who gave me advice on that day, the supervisors and the specialists. We were searching for something more to do, and that was made and decided on, and the impetus for that, of course, was the crash into the Pentagon when we gave that order.
Was your career in the FAA either enhanced or hurt in any way by making those decisions as promptly as you did?
I would say in neither respect, sir.
On 9/11, the command center effectively was the nerve center for information on suspicious aircraft. Yet, as I understand it, the command center had no defined role with respect to obtaining military assistance, fighter assistance. Is that correct? And if so, why weren't those authorities combined?
Available to us at the command center, of course, is the military cell, which was our liaison with the military services. They were present at all of the events that occurred on 9/11. The normal protocols for the events that were transpiring, that is to say, hijacked aircraft, which requires a notification to NORAD, those, at least as I was given to understand, were made promptly, the notifications on each hijack.
You understood that they were made promptly.
That's correct.
It wasn't you, but it wasn't your responsibility to do so.
That is correct. I believe I'm correct in stating that responsibility devolves upon the Air Route Traffic Control Center in whose jurisdiction that hijack occurs. I was given to understand that all such notifications were made, and I had no reason to believe they were not. I'm getting away from your question, though. You asked me if we had a procedure in place to deal with such an event. Is that what you're
At the
asking me?
command center.
Well, I just want to be clear on this aspect of it. Dealing with aircraft that would be hijacked and used as weapons?
No.
No. Dealing with hijacked...
Dealing with direct notification to the military or requests for assistance from the military.
We had no process in place where Command Center would make such a request for military assistance. I believe military was involved, and, you know, I suppose in hindsight it's too simplistic to say that they all look alike to me. If you tell the military, you've told the military. They have their own communication web that I think defeated some of the notification processes that I've been listening to today. But in my mind, everyone who needed to be notified about the events transpiring was notified, including the military.
By the command center.
Correct.
Senator, could I just respond?
Yes, you certainly can.
In direct response to your question, the protocol on that day, the official protocol on that day was for the FAA headquarters, primarily through the hijack coordinator, who is a senior person in the security organization, to request assistance from the NMCC if there was a need for DoD assistance. I mean, that was the formal protocol on that day.
And wasn't the formal protocol for Mr. Sliney to have gotten headquarters permission before he put in these ground stops?
I don't agree with that personally. I think I agree with Mr. Sliney completely. I think they had the authority to make that decision. I think they made the right call.
No question about that.
They make those, not in this scope obviously, but they make ground stop type decisions on a daily basis. And I think the folks there, the folks in Boston, the folks in the facilities, and frankly, at the same time, the people in the Department of Transportation who were coming to that same conclusion, at the same time, they all made the right decision.
So no one criticized Mr. Sliney for having made it without getting permission from headquarters?
I never criticized him, absolutely not, to the contrary.
That's not quite an answer to my question. Do you know whether anyone else did?
I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Sliney?
I was not criticized directly by anyone for making that decision at all. I can say
Indirectly?
that unequivocally. I could say I heard anecdotal information that someone was surprised that we had made that decision, but that was the extent of it. No one has criticized me directly for doing either of those, making either of those decisions.
Well, that's probably as much as we're going to get out of you on that one, so we'll let it go. Mr. Slade, I am told that what is your present assignment?
Presently, I'm an operations manager at the New York Terminal Radar Approach Control. It's involved with the actual operation of the airports in the New York area. There's 20-odd airports, the major ones included.
So you're up in New York now?
Correct.
I'm told that very recently, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, there was some kind of incident or occurrence there which would have involved a notice to the military. I don't really know any more about it than that, but I hope I've given you enough to ask you to describe what that incident was.
I think the incident highlights the need to develop the lines of communication between the operational elements and the military or the people who are going to make the decisions whether or not to scramble.
Well, after almost 3 years, that's a pretty profound statement. So would you proceed?
Well, on the day in question, there was and by the way, you now have 16,000 pairs of eyes and ears, the air traffic controllers in this country, that are extremely alert, in my view, to anything that is unusual in terms of course deviation or any unusual flight at all is reported to the next level of authority. In this case, I'm the second level of authority in the operation of the Terminal Radar Approach Control, and frequently the young men and women there report to me events that they deemed to be suspicious, based on the events of 9/11, of course. And in this particular instance, an aircraft was unidentified aircraft at 16,000 feet approaching New York City from the northwest at a pretty moderate ground speed of 300 knots. No one was working him. We did not know who the aircraft was. We reported it immediately to the Air Route Traffic Control Center, who reported it immediately to NORAD. NORAD later, in the same episode, within a few minutes, asked me if I were requesting a military intervention. And I indicated to NORAD that I'm advising you of the facts of this particular incident. I'm not requesting anything. I wasn't sure I even had the authority to request such a thing. And when the lady persisted at NORAD, I asked her if I could call her back, and I went to the domestic event net, which is available to all facilities, and most of the major facilities are on it. And I queried NORAD and the FAA headquarters as to whether or not I had such authority to ask for intervention by the military or a scramble on this particular aircraft. And they did agree that I had such authority after a discussion on the virtues of collaboration. However, I indicated further when I agreed that we should collaborate on such decisions, but if time did not permit it, did I have that authority? I persisted in that, and they said that I did. I did not know that prior to that moment in time.
Now, how long, while that aircraft was going at 300 knots, did this set of conversations take?
This took several minutes. And it was at the point at which I finally received the answer. The aircraft was southeast of Manhattan and traveling east along the coastline. It turned out, through the remarkable radar that TSA possesses, or the customs people, excuse me, they have the best radar. They indicated that they tracked that backwards to its point of departure, and we identified the aircraft as a photo mission of some civilian nature that was not coordinated with us. But definitely an aircraft that was suspicious. But the point of the whole thing was that I don't believe the lines of communication are as clear as they should be, devolving from the decision-making process down to the operational level, where you have those 15 or 16,000 sets of eyes and ears that are finally attuned to the events that occurred on 9/11.
It would be hard to disagree with you, Mr. Sliney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.